Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huzenka, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Capuano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous materials for the record on H.R. 1726 as amended, currently under consideration.
Without objection.
And, Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 1726, a bill to award a Congressional Gold Medal to the 65th Infantry Regiment known as the Borinqueneers, introduced by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey. The bill authorized the minting and award of a single gold medal in honor of this brave regiment. The medal would be given to the Smithsonian Institution, where it would be available for display or loan as appropriate. Mr. Speaker, in 1898, the United States acquired Puerto Rico in the Treaty of Paris that ended the Spanish-American War. The following year, Congress had authorized raising a unit of volunteer soldiers in the newly acquired territory. In May 1917, 2 months after President Woodrow Wilson signed into law legislation granting United States citizenship to all individuals born in Puerto Rico, and 1 month after the United States entered World War I, the unit was transferred to the Panama Canal Zone. United States Army policy at the time restricted most segregated units to non-combat roles, although this regiment was otherwise combat ready and could have contributed to the fighting effort. In June of 1920, the unit was redesignated as the 65th Infantry Regiment, United States Army. It would serve as the United States military's last segregated unit composed of Hispanic soldiers. In January of 1943, 13 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor that sparked the entry of the United States into World War II, the regiment again was deployed to the Panama Canal Zone before being deployed overseas in the spring of 1944. Despite the regiment's relatively limited combat service in World War II, the unit suffered casualties in the course of defending the Pacific and Atlantic sides of the Isthmus against enemy attacks. Individual soldiers earned 1 Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 90 Purple Hearts. And the unit received campaign participation credit for its service in the Rome-Arno, Rhineland, Ardennes-Alsace, and Central Europe theaters. The story of the 65th Infantry Regiment during the Korean War has been aptly described as, quote, one of pride, courage, heartbreak, and redemption. Arriving in Busan, South Korea in September 1950, the regiment was assigned the mission of destroying or capturing small groups of North Korean soldiers. Its success led General Douglas MacArthur, Commander-in-Chief of the United Nations Command in Korea, to observe the regiment was showing magnificent ability and courage in the field of operations, and is his quote. Fighting as a segregated unit from 1950 until 1952, the regiment participated in some of the fiercest battles of the war. Its toughness, courage, loyalty earned admiration of many who had even previously harbored reservations. Mr. Speaker, the service of the men of the 65th Infantry Regiment is emblematic of the contributions to the armed forces that have been made by hundreds of thousands of brave and patriotic United States citizens from Puerto Rico over generations, from World War I to the most recent conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, and in many other overseas operations. This honor is richly deserved. The bill has 301 co-sponsors in the House, and a companion bill introduced by Senator Blumenthal in the Senate has 63 co-sponsors. I ask for immediate passage of this important legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd yield as much time as the gentleman from Puerto Rico may consume. As everyone knows, Puerto Rico has a resident commissioner here, and he has the luxury of a 4-year term. We all envy that, but at the same time, it's an important position to have and a position that we should listen to.
The gentleman from Puerto Rico is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 1726, a bill that would award the Congressional Gold Medal to the United States Army's 65th Infantry Regiment in recognition of its pioneering military service, devotion to duty, and many acts of valor in the face of adversity. The regiment was composed largely of soldiers from the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, and members of the unit are called the Borinqueneers, which is derived from the Taíno word for Puerto Rico, meaning the land of the brave Lord. Since the term was first used over 60 years ago, coined by members of the regiment on their way to Korea, it has become synonymous with honor, courage, redemption, and pride. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to Mr. Posey of Florida. Working with him on a bipartisan basis to move this bill forward has been a pleasure. I know that Congressman Posey, like me, feels a profound sense of responsibility to these veterans and their families. The surviving members of the regiment are in the twilight of their lives, and so we hope our colleagues in the House and in the Senate, acting on behalf of a grateful nation, will see fit to honor the Borinqueneers while these humble heroes still walk among us. Mr. Speaker, we're honored that the oldest living Borinqueneer, Don Leonardo Martinez, who's 96 years young, is here with us today. Of course, Congressman Posey and I are not on this mission alone. We're working shoulder to shoulder with an army of individuals and organizations from Puerto Rico and the States. These advocates have been inspired by the legacy of the regiment and are mindful of its special contribution to the tapestry of American life. Their campaign on behalf of the Borinqueneers has been exceptional. I want to publicly thank each and every one of them because they are the heart and soul of this movement. I must highlight, in particular, the tireless efforts of the Borinqueneer Congressional Gold Medal Alliance, led by National Chairman Frank Medina. To place the achievements of the regiment in context, it is important to understand that for generations, from World War I, almost a century ago, to Afghanistan today, American citizens from Puerto Rico have built and maintained a rich record of military service. If you visit any U.S. military installation, you will see men and women from Puerto Rico fighting to keep this nation safe, strong, and free. They may speak English with an accent, like I do, but they're just as devoted to this country as their fellow soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from the States. If you need proof, there is a frame on my office wall containing photographs of service members from Puerto Rico that have fallen since 9/11. Row after row of young faces, sometimes smiling and sometimes stern, usually posing in their dress uniforms against the backdrop of the American flag. In a book he wrote about Puerto Rico, former Attorney General Dick Thornburg observed that historically, Puerto Rico has ranked alongside the top 5 states in terms of per capita military service. In the foreword to that book, former President George H.W. Bush noted, quote, "This patriotic service and sacrifice of Americans from Puerto Rico touched me all the more deeply for the very fact that they have served with such devotion, even while denied a vote for the President and members of Congress who determine when, where, and how they're asked to defend our freedoms. No unit better epitomizes Puerto Rico's distinguished tradition of military service than the 65th Infantry Regiment, which was constituted just after World War I, participated in honorable, albeit limited fashion during World War II, and came into its own during the Korean War, earning admiration for its outstanding combat performance. Like society more generally, the U.S. military in the 1950s was different than it is today, and attitudes towards ethnic minorities could be harsh. The men of the regiment not only had to fight the enemy on the battlefield, which they did with bravery and skill, but they also had to overcome negative stereotypes held by some of their commanders and comrades. For example, then Colonel William Harris, who commanded the regiment during the early stages of the Korean War, later recalled that he had been reluctant to assume command of the unit because of prejudice within the military, but that his experience eventually led him to regard the Borinqueneers, quote, "the best damned soldiers that I had ever seen," end quote. Such sentiments would be expressed by many others who witnessed the regiment in action, including General Douglas MacArthur, who wrote the following in 1951, quote, the Puerto Ricans forming the ranks of the gallant 65th Infantry on the battlefields of Korea give daily testament to their invincible loyalty to the United States. They are writing a brilliant record of achievement in battle, and I'm proud indeed to have them in this command. I wish that we might have many more like them." End quote. The experience of the Borinqueneers during the Korean War was perhaps best encapsulated in September 2000 at a ceremony held at Arlington National Cemetery in honor of the regiment by Secretary of the Army Luis Calderas, who observed that the Borinqueneers fought with rare courage even as they endured misfortune and injustice. The Borinqueneers earned many unit-level awards for their service in Korea, including 2 presidential unit citations. Soldiers in the regiment earned many individual awards, including 9 Distinguished Service Crosses, about 250 Silver Stars, over 600 Bronze Stars, and more than 2,700 Purple Hearts. In March of this year, President Obama awarded the Medal of Honor, the military's highest individual award for bravery, to 4 deceased American soldiers from Puerto Rico, including Master Sergeant Juan Negron, who became the first Borinqueneer to be accorded this honor. Moreover, in recent years, the achievements of the regiment have been recognized in many ways. A multitude of state legislatures have approved resolutions in their honor, while numerous parks, streets, and monuments bear the regiment's name. I hope Congress will pay tribute to the Borinqueneers by conferring upon them the Congressional Gold Medal. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Puerto Rico yields. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield as much time as you may consume to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey, sponsor of this great legislation.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan for yielding, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be joined here today by my colleague, Resident Commissioner Pierluisi, who you've just heard from, in support of our bill, H.R. 1726, to award the Congressional Gold Medal to Puerto Rico's 65th Infantry Regiment, known as the Borinqueneers. During the darkest days of the Korean War, the Borinqueneers, an ethnically segregated unit, served with singular distinction during a multitude of major and minor combat engagements. During the now famous Battle of Chosin Reservoir, the regiment fought alongside the 1st Marine Division, covering them through what is recognized as one of the greatest strategic withdrawals in military history. The regiment was known for its fierceness in the face of the enemy and demonstrated their exceptional courage by launching the last recorded battalion-sized bayonet charge in U.S. military history. For its service, the regiment was singled out for special recognition by General Douglas MacArthur, who declared, "I am proud indeed to have them in this command. I wish that we might have many more like them." Last month, Borinqueneer Master Sergeant Juan Negron was awarded the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest military honor, for heroic actions above and beyond the call of duty. Master Sergeant's actions reflected the fighting spirit, sense of duty, and dedication of the entire regiment. The Borinqueneers are part of a proud tradition of distinguished American soldiers that include the Tuskegee Airmen, the Montford Point Marines, Navajo Code Talkers, and the Japanese American Nisei regiments, all of whom have already received the Congressional Gold Medal. I'd also like to recognize the grassroots efforts of the Borinqueneer Congressional Gold Medal Alliance and their national chair, Frank Medina. For many of their members, this bill was the first time ever contacting a member of Congress. Congratulations. We would not be here today if it were not for the tireless efforts of literally hundreds of people in the Borinqueneer community. I'd also like to thank Rob Medina of my Florida office, who first brought this issue to my attention, and Robert Carter, my legislative counsel, who has advanced this legislation as a member of my staff. I rise in full support of the Borinqueneers and urge all of my colleagues to join us to ensure that these American soldiers are recognized for their exceptional, their courageous, and their selfless service to our nation. And I call upon the Senate to take prompt action to pass this bill and allow us to declare mission accomplished. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida yields. The gentleman from Michigan reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yield as much time as you may consume to the gentleman from New York, with whom I agree on almost everything, with the sole exception of his favorite baseball team, which of course should be the Red Sox, and maybe someday it will be. Gentleman from New York, Mr. Serrano.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Every time, Eddie, every time.
I thank the gentleman for the time and the kind comments about my favorite team. I thank the majority party for this opportunity to bring this bill to the floor. This is a very, very special and emotional day on the island of Puerto Rico and throughout the Puerto Rican community in the United States. This is a tribute long, long, long overdue. If you know the history of our country, and we all do, you know that many groups have been treated unfairly. And many have been treated unfairly during wartime, which is so unfair. Let me read to you something that I found that's very interesting. The regiment faced unique challenges due to discrimination and prejudice, including the humiliation of being ordered to shave their mustaches, quote, until such a time as they gave proof of their manhood, being forced to use separate showering facilities from their non-Hispanic officers, being ordered not to speak Spanish under penalty of court-martial, flawed personal rotation policies based on ethnic and organizational prejudices, and a catastrophic shortage of trained non-commissioned officers. Yet, most of them were volunteers, if not all. Yet, they fought with great valor. Yet, they knew that they were very much a part of this nation. And so today, in awarding this Congressional Gold Medal, we're not just repairing a mistake of the past, but we're also paying tribute to ourselves as a nation, because a nation is great in many ways, and one of the things that makes this nation great is that we have made mistakes in the past, but every so often we look back and try to correct them. Under House rules, we're not allowed to point people out in the gallery, but it's important to know that to my right, there are members of the Borinqueneers, as Mr. Pierluisi said, including one who is 96 years old and is still here with us. God bless him. And these folks bring so much glory to our community. I remember growing up in New York, where I grew up. I came at the age of 6. My parents, my uncles, my father, who had all served in the military, would speak about the 65 de Infanteria, the 65th Infantry Regiment, as something so special. It was a moment of glory on Saturday afternoons during a few drinks and a good roast pork or something and rice and beans to discuss a lot of the achievements in music and sports, but the achievements of the 65th Infantry was always part of that conversation because they had endured so much. Not to mention the fact, and this may sound funny, but remember they came from a tropical island and went on to suffer some of the most severe cold weather you could on the battlefields with less equipment, I am told, and history books will show, than other soldiers. And so you see, today we honor them, but today we honor ourselves. We here, on a bipartisan fashion, agree on one thing all the time, and that is that whether you agree on military action or not, when they come home, they should be taken care of properly. And when they're on the battlefield, they'll be treated equally. Those days have passed. The Borinqueneers were the last segregated unit in this country. We no longer have that, thank God. We now fight as one nation, indivisible, undivided, under God. And so I thank both sides. And I thank especially my brother, Mr. Pierluisi, for this initiative, and Mr. Medina, who are across the country. I tell you how important this is. The National Puerto Rican Parade, which is held this year, June 8th, which is the largest ethnic parade of its kind in the U.S., has made as one of its top 3 priorities the awarding of this medal. Little do they know that we beat them to the punch, and while they'll be asking for the medal to be passed, hopefully by 6:30, 7 o'clock tonight, we would have passed it in the House, and it'll be working on the Senate, and which will be, I don't think, that difficult to do. So thank you so much. Thank you as one who had a very simple military career in the Army. Where did they send a Puerto Rican? They sent me to Alaska. Luckily, I grew up in New York, so I was able to adapt to that code. But this is a wonderful day, a glorious day, and without pointing to them in the gallery, we thank them for their service and for their patriotism to this country and for honoring Puerto Rico the way they have. Thank you.
Gentleman from New York yields. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to yield as much time as she may consume. The gentlelady from New York, who has the honor of I had the honor of serving with her on the Financial Services Committee.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 1726, which will pay tribute to the many patriotic Puerto Ricans who have served in the 65th Regiment throughout our nation's conflicts. And I'm very proud today to serve in this body, and the fact that we are having this vote in a bipartisan manner. It's not every day that we have the pleasure of bringing bipartisan legislation to the floor. And I want to recognize Pierluisi, the commissioner from Puerto Rico, as well as Frank Medina, and the countless individuals and organizations throughout our nation and Puerto Rico in trying to get this recognition to the floor and to the Senate. Puerto Ricans have a rich heritage of serving in the military. From the American Revolution, when Puerto Ricans volunteered to fight the British, to current conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, Puerto Ricans have fought and bled to defend the United States. The 65th Regiment, in particular, has time and again exemplified the courage of Puerto Rican soldiers. During World War II, these soldiers were initially deployed to protect the Panama Canal before later shipping to Europe. There, members of the unit will earn score of medals: Purple Hearts, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and Bronze Stars. In the Korean War, the 65th made an even greater mark on history, participating in some of the most significant and bloodiest battles of that conflict. In 1950, the American ground situation in Korea deteriorated, prompting the 65th to be sent to Korea as reinforcement. While sailing for Asia, members of the unit adopted their informal name, the Borinqueneers, derived from the Taino word for Puerto Rico, meaning land of the great Lord. This title exemplified these soldiers' fighting spirit. General MacArthur wrote of the unit's achievement in Korea. They are writing a brilliant record of achievement in battle, and I am proud indeed to have them in this command. I wish that we might have many more like them. I'm proud to note, Mr. Speaker, that one of those brave Puerto Rican troops who served in Korea was my late uncle, Luis Manuel Serrano Medina. Since their participation in the Korean War, the 65th has continued to be an integral part of our armed forces, serving in the global war against terrorism and Operation Iraqi Freedom. In San Juan and New York City, the legacy of these brave warriors have been honored with streets in their names. It is only fitting that Congress now recognize the soldiers' contribution with one of the highest civilian awards. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this legislation, and I ask the Senate to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from New York yields. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Chair, I am prepared to close and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mr. Pierluisi and Mr. Posey for proposing this bill, and I hope that it passes as quickly as possible. I'd just simply like to add one thing. You sit and listen to these things, and particularly in World War II, there was never a question by almost anyone about people of German-American heritage or Italian-American heritage fighting on behalf of the United States of America, even in the European theater. Yet, people had questions about other ethnicities, which I think is a blot on the history of this great country, and I couldn't be prouder to be a very small little part to be here today to try to make amends for those past sins and to say thank you for the Americans who served this great country and helped me live a better life. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to reflect the comments of my colleague from Financial Services, as we have this as the son of a disabled World War II veteran myself. I certainly know what that greatest generation had done. No matter where they geographically came from, they fought for that flag that's behind you today, Mr. Speaker, and we appreciate the work that was done by them and by any of those colleagues that are here, and to my colleague from New York, especially her uncle, and the service that he had to this fine nation. We want to say thank you for that. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I urge rapid passage of this and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 1726 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.